Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Loving obeisances unto the Supreme Being Vasudeva, who is everything there is. Janmadhyasya yato anvayaditaratascha artheshu abhigyaswarad tene brahmahridaya adikavaye muhyanti yatsurayah tejo vari mridam yatha vinimayo yatra trisargo mrisha dhamna svena sada nirastakuhakam satyam param dhimahi. We meditate upon the transcendent absolute being from whom springs forth this universe. He is present in all that exists and yet distinct from everything. He is fully conscious and totally independent. He revealed to the first seer Brahma the import of Vedic wisdom. The material creation, made of threefold gunas, appears in him as though real like water in a mirage. Being eternally self effulgent, he is ever free of the illusion maya of the material world. We meditate upon him, the Supreme Being. Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam shukamukad amritadrava sanyutam pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam muhuraho rasika bhuvi bhavukaha. O devotees who relish a taste for divine love, Bhagavatam is the fully ripened fruit of the wish-yielding tree of Vedas, flowing as immortal nectar from Shuka Brahma Rishi. Go on drinking the sweet nectar day after day. So we are entering the 10th chapter of the 4th Skandha of Srimad Bhagavatam. We are in the middle of Dhruva Charitram, Dhruva, the great devotee of the Lord, and we saw how he went to the forest and got the instructions of Narada, Devarishi, the Narada, and meditated and was blessed with the transcendent darshan, vision of the Supreme Being, and he also got a boon that he would reside in the eternal abode of a star, a nakshatra, to be named Dhruva Nakshatra, which is the North Star, which is ever present and ever stable. And yet, we also saw that Dhruva, after the vision went away, he recognized that he still cherished a slight sense of division in his heart, and therefore he was not very pleased. And it was said by Maitreya that even though he is blessed with the eternal abode at the end of the life, during the long life he is yet to live, he will still have to go through some obstacles and overcome them. And that is what we will see in the next couple of chapters. The essence of this is that Dhruva, who is blessed with the vision of the Lord directly and who gets the boon that he will be situated in an eternal abode, never to be born again, and yet he still had to overcome obstacles, and therefore one has to be alert at all times, and otherwise falling down from the state of freedom, from the state of realization, is quite possible for anyone, and this is also what Dhruva Charitram demonstrates. So we see that Dhruva becomes the king, as we already saw at the end of the last chapter. His father retired to the forest, and then Dhruva married and had sons, while his half-brother Uttama did not get married, and Uttama and Dhruva became very close, as we saw. And Dhruva was very fond of his stepbrother Uttama, and his stepmother also, Suruchi, became very fond of Dhruva after all those incidents happened. And now Uttama goes on a hunting expedition into the Himalayas, up north in the mountains. And when he goes there, he is killed by a Yaksha. Yaksha is a class of beings who are headed by Kubera. We saw briefly when all the various beings were created that one of the rishis, Pulatsya, his grandson is Kubera, who heads Yakshas, who are a class of beings with special powers and who also are mixed with demonic tendencies. And Kubera rules the city called Alaka, which is situated near Kailasha. So we saw, in fact, in the beautiful description of Kailasha, when Brahma goes there heading the group of devas, they cross Alaka, the city of Kubera, before they reach Kailasha. And this Alaka is the city from where Alakananda, the great river, flows and joins Bhagirathi to flow as the divine Ganga. So this city of Alaka, which is where Kubera resides, and the Yakshas all reside along with various spirits and ghosts, and it's called Bhutaganas. They are all attendants of Lord Rudra, that is the manifestation of Shiva in a very angry form. And they also are mixed with demonic spirits and so on. So the Yakshas and the Rakshasas are the class of demons, and Yakshas are a class of beings who are close to Rakshasa. So they are mixed together and they are headed by Kubera, and one of them has killed Uttama, the half brother of Dhruva. And because of this, his mother, Suruchi, the stepmother of Dhruva, who is also very attached to her son, gives up her body, she dies. And we saw, by the way, that this was already prophesied that Uttama will die and his mother will also die. And so that's exactly what happens. But what happens as a result of that is Dhruva gets overcome with anger. So we see that this is the obstacle, the inner obstacle that Dhruva faces, despite having gotten the vision of the Lord and despite having gotten the most wonderful boon. He still got overcome with anger because his half brother was killed by some Yakshas, and his stepmother also gave up her body. Because of all this, Dhruva got very angry. It says, Dhruvo Bhratruvadam Shutva Kopam Arsha Shucharpitah. He became completely overcome by anger, grief, and a sense of revenge. So, this is the classic problem the ego goes through, and Dhruva also, despite having accomplished great penance and great boon that he got, he had gotten overcome with anger. So now we see what happens because of this. Dhruva takes his army and he marches in his victorious chariot towards Alaka. He heads north to the place where Uttama, his half brother, was killed, and he reaches this city of Alaka, which is in the valley of the Himalayas, and he prepares for war. So Dhruva blows his conch to announce to everyone that he has come to exact revenge for his brother's death. And now unfolds a very gory war that is described in such vivid detail, like we can watch a movie. Bhagavatam provides such intense, vivid description. We see this war unfold now. The blast of the conch of Dhruva makes all the Yakshas become very alert. They recognize that Dhruva has come to punish them. So they all rush towards him. Dhruva is armed already. And so what Dhruva does is he takes his bow and he launches 3 shafts at the same time. So Dhruva is an expert archer. So he is able to put 3 arrows in the same time, at the same time, and launch them continuously, and he is raining them with arrows. And because of this, they all are overwhelmed. And then some of these Yakshas have special powers, so they want to one up him. So they are able to lock even 6 arrows in their bows, and they are raining on Daksha and his chariot and whoever is with him. And there are 130,000 Yakshas now who are running, who are raining on him. They are still at a long distance from each other. He has not entered the city. They are from within the city. He has entered the valley from where he can see the city of Alaka. And from where they are, the 130,000 Yakshas, they are launching iron clubs and swords and axes and javelins and arrows. They are suddenly sending this thick volley of weapons, like a hill is covered with shower. The whole of Dhruva's chariot and his charioteer, everything around him is completely covered with arrows, and there is dust rising everywhere. And suddenly, one cannot even see Dhruva or his chariot. Everything is covered completely with dust, and it's completely vanished from sight. And they all say, drowned in the attack of Yakshas, Dhruva has died, the son of Dhruva has set. This is what they are thinking. While they are thinking so, suddenly, out of this mist of cloud and dust, roaring like a lion, Dhruva comes out. He comes again into view like sun tearing through clouds and reappearing. He reappears from this cloud, and now he twangs his bow, and inspiring terror, he unleashes so many weapons that the Yakshas are just completely overwhelmed. It says that their battlefield there is lying everywhere with people's bodies. All the Yakshas, the 130,000 of them, were all mercilessly killed by Dhruva. Their heads were beheaded, so there were so many heads lying on the battlefield. The heads had nice crowns and beautiful earrings, but they were separated from the bodies. Many arms had beautiful armlets and bracelets, but they were separated from the body. There were so many heads with turbans, again separate from the trunk. So, thereby, the whole field was lying with so many bodies, and the whole field of battle looked so gory. And so many other Rakshasas who were there, who were fighting there, they started fleeing, looking at the fury of Dhruva, and it seemed like nobody was left there and the whole place was empty. And yet Dhruva did not enter the city because he was aware that these Yakshas were capable of great uh, magic or great magical powers by which they can do all kinds of things. And so Dhruva tells his charioteer, these people are very skilled in enchantment. So let's not think that they are completely defeated. We don't know what they can do. And therefore, as he remained on guard, just as he expected, suddenly the sky was overcast on all sides. Clouds appeared, lightning came, all kind of sounds came, thunder came, and then it started raining mysteriously. All kinds of dirty water, instead of rainwater, blood flowed, and dirty water flew like sewage water and so on. They started pouring out from the sky. And not only that, from the sky suddenly weapons started raining like maces and swords and all that. And on top of it, suddenly there were animals running and roaring towards them. So all of this is their conjuring skill. These yakshas are known to have various skills to conjure, and this is in a sense resembling what we perceive too. Everything we perceive is ultimately a trick of the mind, and these yakshas were very good at manipulating this. They had many siddhis, as it's called, supernatural powers. By this, they were making clouds appear suddenly, and as we said, dirty water and filth and blood pouring out of the clouds, uh, arrows coming like a mountain, launching all kinds of weapons against Dhruva, and then animals barging from all directions, serpents coming, lions and tigers and mad elephants in herds, all roaring towards Yaksha. So Yaksha is threatened in all directions. There are all kinds of animals roaring towards him from all directions. Weapons are raining from the sky. Dirty water is coming from the sky. And on top of it, they make an ocean appear, and the ocean has got waves that are like it is the end of the times itself, dissolution, like tsunami. There are giant waves. There is, as we know, in the Himalayas, there is nowhere close to an ocean there. It's up in the mountains, and yet Yakshas, through their conjuring trick, make all this appear. They make an ocean appear surrounding the battlefield, and it's slowly closing in with these giant waves, and all these animals are rushing in, weapons are rushing in. So all these conjuring tricks that are peculiar to the demons, the yakshas, displayed all these phenomena that can inspire terror in anyone. And by seeing this through their vision, so many sages who were able to see this by their vision, they saw that Dhruva, who is a great devotee of the Lord, but who has now gotten caught in this because of his own anger, they say a prayer for him that may Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Being, wipe out his enemies and may he be protected, because the lesson here is one who is fully surrendered, even when he falls prey to anger and so on, he still gets divine protection. So that's why it is said that it is never a waste to engage in meditation, engage in surrender, even if it is not abiding. The best option, of course, the best way is to have abiding meditation, abiding devotion, every moment being alert and aware. But it is still better to have any touch of the divine, any glimpse into the divine as it is, than have nothing at all. Since Dhruva had the most glorious glimpse into the divine, he was protected in this calamitous situation by the blessings of the sages. So the sages offered a blessing for him that may he be protected. And with this 10th chapter ends, we enter the 11th chapter. And here, having heard the prayer of the sages, Dhruva was able to perceive that he was given the protection by the prayers of the sages. And then he remembered that he has access to a missile called the Narayana missile, which is the greatest of all missiles. So he locks this Narayana missile and he fixes it to his bow. And then, because this missile is most powerful, it can destroy all illusory appearances. So the example given here is, just as true wisdom removes the illusion of ego and all kinds of other illusory aspects of the ego, just as the dawn of wisdom removes illusion, just as the dawn of sun removes darkness, the weapon of Narayana removes the conjuring tricks of these Yakshas. So in reality, there were no animals there were no snakes there was no ocean there. It was just a trick that was done by the Yakshas to bewilder and to cause terror in Dhruva. And by launching the Narayana missile, suddenly all of these vanished. And after that, Dhruva now got even more angry at them, and he launched with sharp arrows with tremendous fury against all these various beings who were launching all these attacks. So as they ran towards him, he launched so many arrows with such fury that their arms and thighs and necks were all torn apart, and they were all killed and sent away, sent to, it is said, their next realm, as it were. That is, they were, their body and soul were separated, they were all killed, and there was this reign of terror that was unleashed by Dhruva against these Yakshas and Rakshasas. And now, seeing all this, finally, his grandfather, who is Swayambhuva Manu, as we saw, who is a very royal sage, and who is the father of Uttanapada, and therefore the grandfather of Dhruva, he appears there. He has already known that this is happening, and he knows that his grandson, who is ruling the kingdom, has to be set on the righteous path. So he appears there and he puts a stop to the war. He says to Dhruva that this is not correct. So he gives him, he was in fact overcome with compassion because he sees all these Yakshas were getting mercilessly killed by Dhruva. And Dhruva, being a furious warrior, a great Kshatriya, as we saw even in his tapas, he had the Kshatriya spirit. And this Kshatriya spirit, the spirit of the warrior, he unleashed it with full force, full fury. And so many, as we said, hundreds of thousands of people were getting killed. And so Swayambhuva Manu intervened at that time, and he said that this is not right. See, as we saw here, and Swayambhuva Manu will say this very beautifully, it was all caused by one death. His brother was killed, and he took revenge for that by killing a few, and then they attacked him, and then he attacks. This is what's called the cycle of violence that escalates and escalates till it results in total destruction, and that's what Dhruva was engaged in right now. So his grandfather comes And he gives beautiful instructions, which is what forms the core of this chapter. He tells to Dhruva, "O dear child, you have gotten caught in this sinful rage. Be done with it, because this is a gateway to hell." He says, "Alam vatsa atiroshena tamodvarena papmana." This is the door to hell, this anger. Krishna says the same in the Gita, that anger and lust are the two doors to hell. This anger that Dhruva has got, Manu says, this carnage of all these beings, they are all innocent. It is that only your brother was killed by one yaksha, but all these other yakshas, they have not done anything to your brother. And so this carnage of all these innocent beings is not becoming of us. We should not destroy living beings like animals kill other animals. If we take ourselves to be the body, only then we see this diversity, and then we engage in killing. Animals do this killing all the time. In fact, it is said that animals, if anything, at least kill only for reasons of survival and reproduction, whereas human beings kill for ideas and ideologies. And so here, Manu says this is like the manner of the beasts to kill, and then he reminds Dhruva. So, this is the most important thing that the right teacher does. His grandfather has come as his teacher to remind him of his own greatness. Many times we forget and we get caught in the moment, and it takes a great being to remind. And Dhruva is reminded here. He says, "Oh Dhruva, you must remember that in your childhood you adored Sri Hari, who is the source of all beings and who is so difficult to reach, but you were able to behold him through your great tapas, and you constantly held him in your thought, and you got the great boon from him. How come you are now perpetrating this kind of a reprehensible act? You ought to be a teacher, you ought to be instructing others on how to act. Instead, you are setting the wrong example by doing this, because you have to treat people with the eyes of equanimity." So he says very beautifully, we have to treat our elders respectfully, we have to treat those who are inferior to us with compassion, and we have to treat our equals with friendliness. Titikshaya karunaya maitraya cha akila jantushu samatvena cha sarvatma bhagavan samprasidati. If we treat people equally in this way, only then Bhagavan is pleased with us. So there is a verse in Bhagavad Gita also where Krishna beautifully says, "The one who is dear to me is never given to either excitement or impatience, either fear or anxiety. He doesn't cause disturbance to anyone, he is not disturbed by anyone." This is in 12th chapter. Krishna says, "Yasmano dvijate loko, lokano dvijate chayah, harsha marsha bhayodvegair, mukto yah sachame priyah." So that's what Manu repeats here. He says, one who is dear to Bhagavan is one who never gives to all these highs and lows. He doesn't give to excitement, he doesn't give to impatience. He sees everyone equally, and he treats people with respect, compassion, and friendship. And only in this way one can be free of the uh, ignorance caused by the modes of nature. So Manu goes on to instruct that the whole creation, as you know, he is now simply reminding Dhruva, because Dhruva in his prayers said all of these things. His prayers were, of course, by the grace of Bhagavan. Bhagavan touched this young boy's cheeks with his conch shell, and the most divine prayers came out of Dhruva, and he was blessed. But he did not hold these in his heart when he got lost in this emotion of anger, but he knows it deep within, and therefore all that was necessary was Manu to come and remind him of what he already knows. In effect, this is true for everyone. The pure heart is always one with Bhagavan. It is only covered by layers of dust, and all we need for the Guru to do is to remind us of our true self. He cannot and does not give anything new. All he reminds us is what already is. And that's what Manu does here. He says, you know very well that creation, preservation, and dissolution of the universe all happen through the Lord's own Maya, and he is free of all this Maya. It is due to him that the universe moves as if through cause and effect. It is divided in all these ways, in the way of creation, sustenance, and dissolution by his own power. When the equilibrium of the gunas, the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, are disturbed by time. So he, in the form of time spirit, disturbs the equilibrium of the three gunas to create this Maya through which all these various beings are created, and then they are sustained, and then when the right time comes, they are all dissolved. All this is his play when he remains unaffected as the non doer. So, just as the water in a mirage seems to come up, stay for some time, and dissolve, while in reality the sunlight did not create the water in the mirage, though the water in the mirage was appearing because of the sunlight. Similarly, through the Lord's energy, the Supreme Being's energy, the universe seems to come up, seems to remain, and seems to dissolve, while in reality, He does not do anything. It remains untouched. The Supreme Being is untouched by all these activities, and therefore, He, by His own inconceivable energy, brings forth, dissolves, sustains, and dissolves everything, and He enters all beings in their heart, and He also, as time, appears as death. So, everything that there is Him. Different schools of thought call Him in different ways. Some people call Him as karma. Those who don't believe in God, they still call Him as nature, and nature is nothing other than the same Supreme Being. So the materialists, for example, or scientists, they may not accept a supreme being, but they do accept nature and laws of nature, which is another way to call the same supreme being. Some people call him time. So Manu says all these various names are given to him in order to just instruct Dhruva that everything happens by his own agency. There is no individual doer. Everything that happens is through the energy of the Supreme Being, and therefore you ought not to get angry towards anyone and get into the mode of revenge and so on. He says, no one knows the intention of the Lord. So, this is very important to recognize when bad things happen, when seemingly very difficult times come. We don't know why they come, but they all come for a purpose, and they are all necessary for the play of the universe to evolve. Every event, seemingly bad, results in something very good, and every event that is seemingly very good also results in something bad. So, this is a cycle. The highs and lows follow each other, and this is a very mysterious progression of events which happens according to the energy of the Lord, and eventually always good triumphs over evil, and then the universe dissolves. So Manu says nobody can know the intention of the Lord. He is not available through sense perception, he is not available through intellectual cognition. He is the source of all energies. Then how can we even expect to understand the motives or the reasons behind all the various events? He says, Avyaktasya aprameyasya nana shakti udayasya cha navai chikirshitam tata ko vedata swasambhavam. Nicely, so avyaktasya aprameyasya. Aprameyasya means one who cannot be measured, one who cannot be understood. And with various potencies, nana shakti udayasya, one who gives rise to various potencies, his intent, navai chikirshitam, his intent cannot be known. Vedata swasvambhavam. It is not swasvambhavam. It is not possible to know his intention, the mysterious, inconceivable progression of events that cannot be understood by the mind or the senses. And therefore, he says, oh young boy, you need to not hold all these yakshas as the reason for the death of your brother. It is ultimately time, and it is ultimately, therefore, the hand of God that is responsible for everyone's birth and death. When someone is meant to go, they go through the instrument that is fixed by Bhagavan. If we see the hand of God alone in all activities, including birth and death, then we do not ascribe motive to individual, and we recognize that he who creates the universe, who preserves it, who destroys it, he alone takes care of all these activities at all levels. So again, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita the same thing in the third chapter. He says, Ahankara vimudhatma karta ahamiti manyate. He says, only the ignorant thinks I am the doer, or conversely, other individuals are doers, because the three modes of nature act to make all actions possible. He says, Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashah. The three modes of nature, which are the essentially the energy of the Supreme Being, as we saw, they interact with each other in the presence of the Supreme Being, which is pure consciousness, to make all activities happen, and therefore one ought not to ascribe doership to individual entities, whether oneself or others. So that's what Manu says here. Do not think that some yaksha killed your brother. It is in reality the energy of the Lord that makes every event happen, including this death of your brother. And therefore you recognize that this energy of the Lord, which is called Maya, is sourced in the Supreme Being, who is our very self. So what we need to do, he instructs Dhruva now, is with all your being, resort to him alone. He is both death and immortality. He says beautifully that first he says, Saeva Vishwam Srijati, Saeva Avati Hanticha. He says he alone creates the world, maintains it, and destroys it. And then he says, Yesha Bhutani Bhutatma Bhutesho Bhutabhavanaha Swashaktya Mayaya Yukta Srijyati Cha Paticha. It's again a very nice and poetic verse. He says, with his own energy, Maya, he evolves, protects, and withdraws all beings. He is the ruler, he is the protector, he is their very self. Yesha Bhutani Bhutatma Bhutesho Bhutabhavanaha. He says, all these beings, he is the ruler of them, he is the protector of them, and he is the very self of them. And he makes everything happen through his own Maya. So you have to remember that as a child, you, because of the words of your stepmother, went and retired to the woods, and you did great penance, and you were blessed with the great vision of the Supreme Being. Now you have to turn within. So this is the most important instruction of Manu. He says you got one darshan, one glimpse into the divine, which was wonderful for a child to be able to accomplish through your undaunting and resolute spirit. But now you have to turn your eyes within and seek that same Supreme Spirit who is ever present in the heart, who is ever free of any attributes, who is one without a second, who is ever free, and by whose presence this whole world, which is unreal, seems to exist. So, this is the essence of true devotion, to see the Lord without and then to behold him within. Dhruva got this great darshan without, and now Manu says you have to see him within and abide in the vision of the Supreme Being within, who abides there forever. He says, Tamena Angatmani Mukta Vigrahe Vyapashritam Nirgunam Ekam Aksharam Atmanam Anvicha Vimuktamat Madrig Yasmin Idam Bhedam Sat Pratiyate. So he is Nirgunam, without any attributes, Ekam, one, Aksharam, imperishable, Mukta Vigraham, he is the embodiment of freedom, and he is the very self. So you have to recognize him with your eyes turned inward, and by practicing such devotion, by such supreme abidance in him who is the inner controller of all beings, whose pure and absolute bliss, you will be able to succeed in removing the notion of I and mine. He says, Bhaktim Vidhaya Paramam Shanakair Avidya granthim vibhedyasi mama ahamiti prarudham. So it's a nice verse again. Through bhakti, avidya granthim. Granthi means a knot. The knot of ignorance can be broken through devotion. And mama ahamiti. So the knot of ignorance appears as I and mine. So this knot of ignorance in the form of I and mine can be broken by abiding devotion in your heart. Therefore, he says, by your great learning, by your great wisdom, you have to curb your anger, which is the greatest impediment to attainment of the Supreme Being. So, this is the instruction given by Manu, very beautifully again summarizing the whole teaching and also driving home the most important point that it is not enough to get one glimpse, one experience. There are many who engage in meditation and get some glorious experience in samadhi, and then they carry that experience in their memory, and then they are not going about their day-to-day activities with an alert awareness. So this whole episode of Dhruva points to the most important fact that one great experience or one great vision or one great mystical samadhi or all that, while it has its wonderful purpose, as we saw it protected Dhruva all through, it is not enough if one is not alert and aware and constantly abiding in inner devotion, in recognizing the pure consciousness within and abiding in this awareness that animates everyone and everything, free of diversity. If we are not abiding in this way, then even despite having the most wonderful spiritual experiences, one can fall prey to anger. And that's what the story of Dhruva now reminds us. And so Manu comes and gives out of his compassion to his grandson and also out of his compassion to all those getting killed. He gave this beautiful instruction, which is for all of us, and thereby Bhagavatam gives another important lesson to not take for granted anything, including great experiences, but always, every moment, live in alert awareness and thereby live in divine consciousness each moment and be free of anger and so on. Finally, Manu also says, as a matter of fact, he says, you have also offended Kubera, because we know that Yakshas are all ruled by Kubera, we saw that, and Kubera is a friend of Lord Shiva. So he says, you have also committed an offense towards Kubera by killing all these Yakshas. So please also offer your prayers to Kubera and you have to propitiate him. And most importantly, you have to be free of this anger, and with total freedom from anger, you have to also offer a hand of friendship to Kubera and the Yakshas. So having given this instruction to Dhruva, Swayambhuva Manu returns from where he came, and Dhruva, having received this instruction, stops his battle, and now he will truly go inward and fulfill the prophecy of being fit to reach the eternal abode of the Supreme Being. We'll see that in the next chapter. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.